Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Each year, the Community Service Society asks low-income New Yorkers to describe their concerns and views on policies that affect their lives. This year, they asked those New Yorkers about their priorities for the city's next mayor. And then, hoping to influence the mayoral debate and raise the public's consciousness, they reported these findings in their report, The Race for Mayor, What's in It for Low-Income New Yorkers. Co-author Nancy Rankin is the Vice President for Policy Research and Advocacy at CSS, and she's my guest today. And welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So this annual survey that you've done up until this year, it's about what you call it the unheard third. So explain it. Tell me who they are.
Well, the reason we call it the unheard third is because it may surprise people that actually a third of voting age citizens in New York City are below twice the federal poverty level. So this is a huge potential group, and we felt like their voices were not being adequately heard in the public debate.
It raises an interesting question. What's the federal poverty level and what's New York City's poverty level, and how did we arrive at these different things?
Well, there's one federal poverty level for the whole country, so it doesn't reflect any differences in cost of living, which is, of course, much higher in New York City. So the federal poverty level for a family of 3 now is about 18,000 and change. For a family of 4, 24,000. So it's the same in New York City as it would be in Alabama or Mississippi. New York City, under the leadership of Mark Levitan, has actually developed its own poverty measure that takes into account things like the higher cost of living in New York, and it also takes into account the effect of transfer payments like the EITC or food stamps.
The EITC is the
Earned Income Tax Credit, so that things that are public benefits that are like cash get counted in the city's poverty measure.
So is that because all states don't have the same extra benefits?
No, it's just that those are not counted in the federal poverty measure. When they made it up many years ago during the war on poverty, they took what they said that most poor people spend about a third of their income on food. So they looked at what was the minimal food budget and multiplied it by 3 and said that's the poverty level.
I see.
And then we'll just increase it a little for inflation every year. But of course, the market basket of goods that people have these days is very different. Food is not 1/3 of the budget, especially in New York, where housing is probably 2/3 of the budget for a low-income person.
So it's better that we use the New York City.
Yes, of course, for New York.
So then that means that the people who are in the 1/3 unheard population are making what, 35,000?
Well, for our purposes, we're using for the unheard third twice the federal poverty level, which comes closer to what the New York City poverty level would be.
Good. So who are those unthird? I mean, are they working poor? Are they really poor? Are they desperately poor?
Well, I mean,
is that a way of categorizing them?
You know, they're all of those. I mean, a lot of the poor today are working. They're just not earning enough, or they're not working enough hours to afford the basics, and they're suffering hardships as a result.
So when you did this survey, what did you find? What are the issues that they perceive to be the most important?
Well, the issues that low-income New Yorkers are most worried about are, not surprisingly, jobs, schools, crime, and affordable housing.
And then the mayoral, and interestingly enough, the mayoral debate is now reflecting that.
It's not just interesting, it's amazing.
Amazing.
Because for many years, you know, we have pushed these issues. We've tried to say, here's what, you know, low-income New Yorkers are concerned about. You should be addressing those issues. And in other years, people have talked about sometimes the 2 Americas, or Freddie Ferrer talked about the 2 New Yorks, and it never gained traction. And this year, for some reason, and we can talk about that, it's somehow people get it. And we've seen that this election, that, you know, we tried so hard. We had a couple of mayoral debates about things like low-wage workers, about affordable housing, about public housing, about paid sick days. And somehow these issues really gained traction this year.
Don't you think Occupy Wall Street is part of the reason that happened? That they dramatized the 1% and the 99%, and then it sort of in a way got carried into the Obama and Romney debate, and each year it got better, and then you guys ran this stupendous campaign for paid sick days.
Thank you.
So it's all developing. I mean, it's gathering each time.
It's gathering
comes
steam.
Up. Yeah.
And I think people see this greater income inequality now. And what they see is that we lost a lot of higher wage and middle wage jobs during the Great Recession. And the jobs that we've gained have been overwhelmingly low-paid jobs. Jobs that in industries that on average pay below $36,000 a year. That's not enough to get you into the middle class. And so I think people are seeing this divide. I mean, one interesting factoid, if you will, is Forbes, reported just recently on Mayor Bloomberg's wealth, and his net wealth in the last year went up $6 billion. Okay, that increase in his net worth is more than the total combined incomes of all 1.7 million poor New Yorkers.
It's amazing.
So not that we begrudge him his wealth.
Yeah.
We're glad that he's wealthy, but it just puts it in perspective.
Right. And he's right that more wealthy New York people have come to New York. Not only that, we have the hedge funds that sort of blossomed forth after the crisis in Wall Street. And people are making so much money. And in Manhattan, where I live, the cost of apartments are millions and millions of dollars. People have to have billions to buy them. So it's self-dramatic, it's self-dramatizing.
So dramatic. But what we see is that the top 10% has bounced back since the recession, and they're doing fine. They're basically doing fine. But the bottom third, or 40% even, is slipping backwards and hasn't made any gains.
I remember reading, and I can't remember the figure, of the number of people in the city who earn billions of dollars. I mean, it's more than one. So that's a dream. It's even more than winning the lottery. So it becomes, no wonder lottery. Now we're going to do gambling.
We're not going to do gambling.
Or it's proposed that we do. And that's another injustice, because that's seen as an economic development project, right? It's going to help the revenue of the state, and it's going to rob more from poorer people, from statistics and figures.
Because that's who gambles, who can least afford to gamble. So I think it's a bad idea. It's not going to help the people who need.
I agree with you totally. It's always been that way. We've always felt that. What I always wondered since the welfare reform during the Clinton era was, did all the people who were getting aid to something, what was that called? Aid to?
AFDC,
yeah,
Aid to
AFDC,
Families
right.
with Dependent Children.
Did all of those people get covered by the safety net that TANF provided, temporary assistance to needy families?
No, welfare rolls, in fact, dropped dramatically, and they haven't gone up much during the recession, as you might think they would go up. So a lot of people are working, but they're working in these low-paid jobs that are not enough to eliminate hardships for them.
So what do we do to improve these different things? And what are you recommending to the candidates?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things. I mean, we talk about jobs, and there are things that the mayor could actually do. First, there's raising the floor for low-wage workers, because I think most people feel, the basic American bargain, if you will, is that if you work really hard, you ought to at least be able to pay the rent and put food on the table and send your kids to a decent school. And so we can raise the floor. The state has raised the minimum wage, but it's gone up, it's going to go up in little steps over 3 years.
The minimum wage now is $7.25.
25 cents, and it's going to go up to $9 over 3 years. But you know what? They forgot about tipped workers, and their wages haven't. Well, the governor has to appoint a special board to raise the tip minimum wage. Most people don't realize that tip workers don't even get the minimum wage as their base wage. They get something less, for under $5. an hour. So and a lot of the minimum wage workers are these tip workers.
Oh, who
so
who deliver food and stuff.
Or work in restaurants.
Yeah.
And so we need to, why shouldn't they have the same minimum wage that everybody else has? Paid sick days, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
We're extremely glad that we finally, after 4 years, were able to pass this common sense measure so that, everybody doesn't have to worry about losing their pay or risking their job if they get the flu. And yet, we haven't covered all workers. We could easily extend it to all workers. Why should we leave out workers in firms with fewer than 15 or 20 workers? And the mayor could be a champion for policies at the federal level, like expanding the earned income tax credit and defending food stamps from being slashed.
We have a terrible problem.
We have a mayor who has been just great at using his power in the bully pulpit of New York to talk about things like gun control and anti-smoking and obesity. It's great he's doing that, but imagine if we had a mayor who was championing things like indexing the minimum wage and expanding the earned income tax credit. So those are policies that lift the floor. But we can also use the city's leverage. The city makes a lot of huge multi-million tax breaks to firms and makes zoning changes that create windfall gains to encourage development. We could do a better job of tying those to requiring local hiring, training, living wages, more affordable housing units. And that wouldn't cost more money. It would just tie it to some requirements.
Right, and it would bring up the bottom so we have less of the disparity. Can the city council raise the minimum wage for New York City, do you know?
No, the city council can't do it because the state would preempt it, but we could ask the state to change that. Because some cities, like San Francisco and many, there are cities that have their own minimum wage. And why should the minimum wage be the same in New York City as in Chemung County?
Yeah, but it's interesting because we could do our own paid sick leave.
Yes, we could do our own paid sick leave, but the minimum wage I think would require
to be similar to taxes?
I just think that my understanding, I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that New York City would need permission from the state to change the minimum wage for the city.
So do you think the attention de Blasio has gotten, I think it's going to have an effect, don't you think, on the Democratic Party and what happens in future elections?
I think so.
They're all looking at it and they seem to be slightly surprised.
I think because people are, they're seeing that this has worked, that this has gained traction. And when we do our surveys, what we find is that New Yorkers, not just low-income New Yorkers, but we also survey moderate and higher-income New Yorkers to see where their opinions are the same and where they disagree. And what we see is that moderate and higher-income New Yorkers say they're worried about widening income equality, they're worried about the disappearing middle class, and that fewer than half think that a poor person can work their way up into the middle class these days.
That's the most discouraging part. But it's interesting that we have generally a consensus about what we need to do.
We do have a consensus. I mean, it's just really striking that moderate and upper income people are saying, we asked about this question of tying business incentives to local hiring and wages and so on. And
they didn't mind.
Not only didn't they mind, but first of all, Democrats and Republicans agree. And there's a tremendous boost, about 50, 40, they're sort of divided on if you just say, should we have these business incentives to encourage development and growth? When you ask, should we have these business incentives if they're tied to requirements for local hiring and higher wages and affordable housing, the support shoots way up. And it does it across the board for Democrats, independents, Republicans, low income,
interesting.
high
Yeah.
income,
Yeah.
that people think we should be getting something back.
And they're right, I think. Most of the people in poverty come down to children. Is that right?
Yes, most of the people in poverty, I think.
But a lot of other countries give people, what is it, an allowance, a child allowance or something. And that is a way of evening it up also, isn't it? If you need it, I mean, is there an income distinction there? If you have 3 children and say the country's giving you $150 a child a month, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Well, you know, the U.S. doesn't do a very good job, and these are basic income supports for low-income families. Some of the things like the earned income tax credit, you do get more if you have more children. So some of our, you know, and some food stamps and so on. So some of our benefits are
comparable.
You know, do take into account family size. But in general, in particular, the U.S. is not very good at basic benefits that help people balance their work and family responsibilities. And that's where, you know, the United States ranks 0 compared to every other country in the world.
Yeah. With child care.
With child care.
Paid sick leave.
With paid sick leave,
yeah.
with family leave.
Family leave.
Paid family leave. And we're hoping
That's an issue in New York State legislature, right?
Absolutely, it is. And in New York, it would be very easy to do that because we already have what's called a temporary disability insurance system.
That's right.
So California had that, and so did New Jersey, and so did Rhode Island. And so those states have all extended it to provide paid family leave insurance. And we already have the system and mechanism in place for pennies a paycheck. We could add family leave so that people who, when they have a new child, more and more people now are baby boomers that are going to have aging parents to take care of. And it would provide a little income replacement when you need those couple of months to care for a newborn or when you need several weeks to care for an aging parent. And New York could do this very easily.
This is part of the governor's agenda, the women's agenda that was...
the women's equality.
Equality, yeah.
It was, oddly enough, for some reason left out of that.
Is that right?
And we're hoping to get it in. Because it is a huge income. And we tend to think in a lot of the conversation about family-friendly policies in the U.S. has been really about upper-income professional women. But these policies are critical for single moms. I mean, single moms have the highest poverty rates. And so if these are problems and dilemmas for professional women, they're a crisis.
Right.
Poor mothers.
We have these books all coming out about how you can have it all or how you strive to do this. And then we look at the poor people and the single moms who have several jobs, who have housing problems, education problems, everything. It's just astonishing. So why don't you write a book about that?
Well, I did. I wrote Taking Parenting Public.
Oh, did you?
Quite a few years ago. And unfortunately, very few of the issues have been resolved. We just haven't moved forward.
Yeah.
And I wrote a piece called The Other Mothers, which is about how important these issues are for low-income mothers who, you know, not only don't they have it all, they don't have anything at all.
Oh. And the stress that must cause them and the families as a result, because how can you live with all of these worries without having that stress that has to affect the dynamics of a family? Education was also another issue that everybody was interested in. And that's a general interest, right?
That's a top interest of middle and higher income New Yorkers, and it's also an interest for low income New Yorkers.
Did you ask a question about charter schools?
We asked a question actually this year that we haven't released yet, but I'll give you a preview since I'm here. is we ask people, do they prefer what I'd call a market approach, where you're closing low-performing schools and opening new schools and charter schools and giving parents more choice, or do you prefer increasing the resources for low-income, schools serving poor children in low-income neighborhoods, perhaps paying teachers more, smaller class size, and that approach. And low-income New Yorkers and most moderate and higher-income New Yorkers prefer investing in schools in poor neighborhoods. I think what parents are saying is they don't want to have to do some huge research thing and apply to a zillion schools, and they don't have the time and resources to navigate this complicated system and hope that their kid gets into one school clear across the city. They want their school in their neighborhood to be a good school.
So that is a rejection of the Department of Education's current practices.
I think so. I mean, some Republicans have more mixed views, but most New Yorkers, they want to see, let's make the schools in these low-income neighborhoods better schools.
And the interest in education doesn't stop with the public schools. I mean, we have an enormous amount of kids that drop out, that don't graduate.
Yes, yes.
And do you have a figure about that?
Well, about a third of the kids in the New York City public schools don't graduate. And,
and that's not limited to 4 years. That's just don't graduate.
Don't graduate. And it's, the figure, the graduation rates have inched up during the Bloomberg years. And I give the mayor a lot of credit for focusing on education and trying his best. I think he did try his best. But a third of the kids not graduating from high school, what are they going to do? What are they going to do, with their lives? What job can they have? And if you looked at the figures for African American and Latino youngsters, especially the boys, their graduation rates are much more dismal. We have some good innovative programs. We need to expand their scale to help these kids get reattached to school, get GEDs, find a way back into, if they've already dropped out, we need to do things. I often wonder, this sounds sort of simple-minded, but look at the campaign we've done for anti-smoking. What if we went back to that old notion, when they used to say you had to stay in school?
Right.
What if we did a campaign of that magnitude to really scare kids and parents into what it means
and
to
we're
not
talking
graduate.
about some technical training also, right?
Career and technical education, and we find a lot of support in our polling data. People don't feel the way, vocational ed used to be stigmatized. I think now people want to see good quality career and tech programs. The mayor has done some innovation recently in that area. We were very involved in pushing in that direction because we want to, kids want to be able to see that there's a connection, that if I do well, I can end up with a job. And P-TECH is a program that even President Obama
has
highlighted. So we need to do more of that.
And then we need to get more people into colleges.
Into colleges.
Whether junior colleges, 2-year colleges, or 4-year college.
One of the things we've seen during the Great Recession is that it's harder and harder to get into CUNY 4-year colleges.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
So here we are at CUNY. And what we've seen is that a lot of African American and Latino students in particular, that their numbers and percentages in the 4-year colleges have declined. And so we really need to turn that around because we now know that you really need a 4-year college degree to get ahead. And there was always this sense, well, they could go to the community college and then they transfer. But the graduation rates from the community colleges are abysmal. That path has not been succeeding. So we need to figure out how we open up those 4-year.
Now, when you do all this research, who do you work with to transfer into actual policies of the city or the state?
Well, for us, we see that the end of research is not a glossy report. It's a change in public policy. And I think paid sick days was just a great example of that, where we uncovered in our reports, starting in 2002, I was shocked to see how few workers had a single paid sick day. And we kept at it, and a lot of our research helped make the case for the need.
And you
for
mounted,
paid
you
sick
became
days.
part of a
Became
very
part of an
effective coalition.
advocacy campaign.
Yeah. So you work with advocates a lot.
We are advocates. We work with advocates. Just as in this year, we raised a lot of issues about affordable housing, about public housing.
You even, we have about 30 seconds, but you even raised interesting issues about stop and frisk.
Yeah. One other just point on education I would say is that I think we also have to turn it on its head, because we tend to think of education as the way to fix poverty. But we also have to fix poverty as a way to fix the schools, because the low-income students are the ones that are having so many challenges. So it's a chicken and egg problem. Education by itself is not going to end poverty. We have to also be looking at ways to end poverty so that kids have the resources and wherewithal to do better in school.
That third of the population is, and I think all of us, I shouldn't say just a third, are very lucky to have organizations like you and people like you who are doing this research. You can go to the website, which is www.css.org. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ronnie.
Is there any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore? Please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.